to address one of the most pressing challenges facing our island, drug-related issues, with a particular focus on the alarming rise of fentanyl. We are privileged to have an exceptional lineup of panelists joining us: policymakers, law enforcement officials, educators, and community leaders, each bringing their unique perspectives to this vital discussion. Their insights and dedication remind us of the need for a united approach, one that fully acknowledges the complexity of the issue and aims for compassionate, comprehensive solutions. To set the stage for today's discussion, it is my pleasure to invite the Dean of the School of Business and Public Administration, Dr. Roseanne Jones, to the podium for her welcoming remarks. Dr. Jones, the floor is now yours.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. I am pleased to be here today and to see the title of this, War on Drugs. In 1998, when I first came to Guam, I approached the intersection of Marine Corps Drive and Route 4 to find a very large signage. Time it was black and had red letters on it, and it said, "War on Ice." And having just come from Philadelphia and seeing the logos at the bottom, I thought, do they have an ice hockey team here? Because where I come from, War on Ice was the campaign for come see the Flyers, the Philadelphia Flyers battle the Toronto Maple Leafs or the New York Rangers. Today, as I approach that intersection, the message is far more clear. There is no confusion as to what that message is. I have to say, when I saw the note that the capstone was going to be war on drugs, I asked myself, again? We've done this before. But maybe we need to do it still. And clearly that's the message. We cannot give up on a continuing problem that is escalating, changing, but is still ever present. When I used to teach students in my first introductory class on economics, I wanted them to understand that the social issues that we have are also economic issues. And so I would share with them an article written by Douglas North, who is a Nobel Prize winner in economics. The title of that article is Sex, Booze, and Drugs. And I would give them that article mainly to catch their attention. They're freshmen after all. And who wouldn't want to read an article with that title? But as they would get through that article, they would soon see that the issue is not a straight line solution. The issue is complicated. And when you think you solved one problem, perhaps you've created another. Communities such as Portland, Oregon, have decriminalized drugs and drug use. A friend of mine who has a son who is a long-term drug user, I asked how he was doing. He said, "Joe's doing great. He's moved to Portland." And I thought, what does great mean in that context of moving to Portland? Maybe his lifestyle of not worrying about the criminal aspects of what he's doing, or maybe it's just made it easier. My daughter has relocated to the States, and coming recently from Guam, she said she doesn't have a car, doesn't have transportation. She's living in one of these communities, and she said, I have to take a bus to get into the inner city. She got quite a learning experience. She said, someone was smoking crack cocaine in front of me on the bus. These are the kinds of things that happen to communities with the good intentions that they think are great policy, and you see the consequences of it. But we are in some ways doing well, we're doing better. Or at least that's the messaging that we're getting from our national agencies in the United States to keep track of things. For example, fentanyl deaths are down. It doesn't mean that fentanyl use isn't continuing. It's just that the availability of Narcan is making a difference. So we've got the problem still here, but the consequence may be ameliorated, and therefore we may see a continuing use of fentanyl if the fear of death is taken away. We see our young people are now banding together as they go out for a night out, where they watch each other's drinks. And so one goes to the restroom, they make sure that someone is watching to make sure that nothing is put in that drink that they're not expecting. I recall a New York Times magazine cover, lots of squares with pictures on the cover. An overlay of that said, they did not intend to die. These were young people who, for whatever reason, became engaged in the acquisition and consumption of drugs in small ways, small starts to addiction, that ended up with death as a consequence. I'm glad that you're all coming together today, because everyone in this community is somehow affected by the topic that you're looking at. And war on drugs, to eradicate drugs, is an important way of conceptualizing it. But there's another war with drugs, and that's in response from what we're seeing as what's coming in from foreign countries. It's a different kind of war using drugs. Customs and Border Protection in California indicated that there's enough fentanyl that was discovered there, trying to make its way into the country, that would kill every American. Think about that. Think about that kind of war that is being waged on our populations. So back to my initial comment that these are complicated issues, and I'm really grateful to the panel who are here today, to the students who are asking the right questions, to the faculty that are leading and engaging us in this conversation. It is one that we are a part of. It is a larger conversation, and I look forward to being here with you today as we work through the many aspects and try to avoid many of the unintended consequences of some good actions. The one important message is, it is visible, it is clear what we're dealing with, and now how do we deal with it? Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for your insightful remarks. We now invite our distinguished panelists to introduce themselves. Each panelist will have 1 to 2 minutes for a brief self-introduction. We have 3 microphones available with 1 shared between 2 panelists. After you complete your response, we kindly ask that you place the microphone back on the table so the next panelist may proceed. We'd also like to express our gratitude to Colonel Carbolino of the Guam Police Department for attending on such short notice. Thank you for participating in this forum. To maintain order, we'll begin introductions with Colonel Carbolino and proceed from left to right, including with Senator Chris Barnett. This sequence will be followed throughout the forum to ensure a consistent flow of responses. Introducing first, Colonel Carbolino.
Yes, my name is Colonel Joseph Carbolino. I've been with the Guam Police Department for approximately 35 years. And I also served 2 years with the Guam Department of Corrections. as the director. So I'm kind of familiar with the front end and the tail end of the criminal justice system. And I'm here to tell you that this forum really is a great opportunity for the students as a part of the alma mater here, right? I graduated here years ago, and we did forums like this, and it's very, very enticing for people out in the community to really know what you guys are doing, and hopefully everyone learns something from the panel here, right? Expertise that's on this table, and leave it at that. I have with me Major Fred Charloff. He's in charge of and oversees the criminal investigations division, which deals with drugs.
My name is Doug Moylan. I am your elected Attorney General. You are my client. I guess the first thing I'll run down is I've got 32 years of experience as an attorney in our jurisdiction. I've served in all 3 branches of the government of Guam. And this is my second term as a 4-year elected Attorney General. I first served as the first elected Attorney General from 2003 to 2006. I am a public servant. I am your servant. Current role is AG as the Chief Legal Officer, and on Guam, the civil and criminal are in one Attorney General, like the Department of Justice, so I'm also the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, leading and heading the effort against drugs and many other crimes along with my brethren, law enforcers such as the Guam Police Department, Customs, and so forth. The issue is complicated. I like that statement. They did not intend to die. I think that those 2 statements should be pervading our entire discussion today. As an Attorney General, what I found helpful is that I need to stay in my lane, as does every other government employee that's working for you, our taxpayers, and our people. I am a law enforcer. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a person that goes out and holds people's hands. I'm the one that enforces the laws that Chairman Barnett and his colleagues passed in our books, our law books. We set legal policy along with our judges and the Supreme Court and so forth. Meth addiction is a problem, but it's not just a legal problem. As you can see from our billboards that we're putting out, the programs we're setting out, meth literally is killing our population, killing our family, our friends. I've had several people in my family that have died from drug abuse, meth. We're seeing in the AG's office meth addicts on law-abiding citizen-type crimes, and we're also seeing meth addicts on meth addict-type crimes. I think 5 or 6, if not 7 murders this year. All I've heard is some connection with meth. First 2 murders of this year, the Korean tourist and the Valentine's Day murder, 2 law-abiding citizens whose lives ended. They did not expect to die. That reinvigorated our office on going after the meth addicts. Lock them up, do not let them out. It's like I often use the analogy, it's a vampire. The thirst is going to get them. You cannot trust a meth addict. You need to put them behind bars and get them the help they need, but separate them from our population because they're killing us. They're going from nonviolent crimes to violent crimes, and that's what we're seeing now because the price is so low. So I welcome this discussion and I thank you all for inviting me.
Good day. Thank you for the invitation to serve as a panelist today. I think it's a very important topic. I'm Judge Maria Senzon. I sit in the Superior Court of Guam. I currently preside over a criminal case docket, including the adult drug court, family violence court. Prior to that, I actually was in private practice for I've been an attorney and in the legal community for almost 30 years, and the time just goes by so quickly. I've served as a judge now for about 12 years. I've also been involved in the therapeutic courts, not just in general jurisdiction. General jurisdiction means you, as a judge, hear every type of case that comes into court. Now I'm concentrated on the criminal docket, which means the cases that the Office of the Attorney General files. I get a random assignment to these cases, but specifically I also preside over violence docket and the adult drug court. I'm one of two judges, actually. Judge Tolentino, the other judge who presides over the adult drug court one docket. Prior to that, in 2015, I also stood up our Veterans Treatment Court, which is, again, a diversionary program for individuals who are service members with prior military service who have become justice involved. And one of the topics that I will discuss while a panelist here will be the treatment courts that are offered in the judiciary of Columbia. Thank you for inviting me to speak about this very important topic.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Robert Ramirez. I am the Homeland Security Investigations Special Supervisor Special Agent. Just for your information, Homeland Security Investigations is a component of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We are the second largest federal law enforcement agency in the nation. We have over 10,000 employees, 30 SAC offices, which are Special Agent in Charge offices, 235 smaller offices, and 56 offices internationally. In our Guam office, we have 10 agents, 1 criminal analyst, and 1 forensic auditor. And we also partner up with our local law enforcement, so we have 5 task force officers that we work with. Our primary concerns are, the primary things we do address are narcotics and immigration type of related investigations. We also do a lot of financial things. And part of the reason I'm here is to talk to you about narcotics and the problems we're having on our island. I'm also here to, because you're students, you know, if you need any guidance regarding a federal law enforcement career, I'm free for questions after. So feel free to approach me. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Steve Vittori. I'm the Executive Director for the Public Defender Service Corporation. I was born and raised on Guam. I graduated from Simon Sanchez High School. Any sharks out there? Anyway, so the Public Defender Service Corporation, we basically provide legal representation to individuals charged with crime. Specifically in this context, last year fiscal year 2024, we opened about 180 drug-related cases or drug possession cases. I mean, there are many other crimes that are drug-related, but just the possession cases alone went up. Last year was 189. Prior to that, it was like 112 or 120. And you know what's really interesting is if you actually look at the actual arrest GP makes, there's a huge gap, right? Because let's face it, we all know someone who might be using that. It's far more widespread than the number of cases that we have. That the 189 is probably like 85% of the drug cases charged out. The other cases go to the alternate public defender and also in the private attorney panel that the AG more than used to be on, right? So there's a whole team of attorneys appointed to represent people who are unable to afford an attorney. And by the drug docket is one of the largest dockets. And so I would really like to thank the Capstone Committee for coming up with this topic. It's very timely. And I think, you know, as a community, right, even though I represent people charged with crime, believe it or not, even my clients are against meth and against crime, all right? Our clients are people's fathers and mothers, brothers, sisters, sons and daughters, you know, and so we represent them on an individual basis, people with families, children who are being affected by this terrible scourge on our island. And so we want to be part of the solution. We think Guam is such a small, tight community that if we actually put our heads together, you know, we can really win this war, right? And we can also prevent the future harm that we see sweeping the nation with the number of fentanyl deaths. Fortunately, in Guam, we haven't seen the numbers that they're seeing in the mainland, but it's like in the hundreds of thousands right now, people dying from fentanyl. And that's really more because it's an opiate kind of base addiction, but people are mixing it with meth, people are mixing it with marijuana because of its addictive nature, right? So I know a lot of you young kids out there smoking weed, right? Be careful where you get your weed from, right? People might be putting fentanyl in it. hasn't happened as much as we thought it would, but it's gonna happen, all right? But since we are at the tail end of the fentanyl epidemic, we can learn from experiences from across the country, right? And so we have the opioid recovery council, which is funded with all these millions of dollars from the opioid settlement. And the attorney general is the chairman of that committee, and you know that the committee has played an integral part in addressing the meth epidemic that has hit the island. All right, so I look forward to the discussion, and we save the best for last.
Thank you. Thank you again to the students who invited me, gave me the opportunity to come back for another forum. I know I attended quite a few forums here. Wahosi Senator Darrell Christopher, I'm a function of Barnett. I'm a freshman senator. I was recently reelected to a second term. Sidos Masi. Right now, I chair the Committee on Public Safety, Education, and the Arts, and meth, specifically the drug epidemic, is something that I campaigned very heavily on when I ran for senator. And when I took office, I started asking questions about why we're not seeing, as the doctor mentioned, a war on ice type of response, or a Medania drug task force type of response. The answer I got was that we didn't have enough police officers on the force, and so I worked very hard with the support of my good colleagues, to include Senator Sabina Perez here, to do things to increase the retention and recruitment abilities of the Guam Police Department, so that we could see more police officers on the streets. Also, when I took office, our penalties for meth and fentanyl, although they were not exactly weak, were nowhere near kind of the standard that is applied in the United States of America. So I also was able to pass legislation to increase those penalties. I think that the people who are poisoning our island, who have poisoned our island with meth, and who are starting to poison our island with fentanyl, deserve the harshest penalties. I think that a lot of times our culture, we're enabling a lot of this drug use, and a lot of what we see outside. For example, you know, I stayed on South, and working in Agani at the legislature, I'm very used to seeing homeless people who every day ask for $10 so they could go take a hit off someone's meth pipe. You know, when I was a teenager growing up in the 90s, when we had the war on ice, the price of meth was $500 a gram, and now we're hearing reports that it's $20 a gram. And so, although I'm used to seeing that type of activity in Agania and the north, now at the grocery store I go to in the south, down in Jognia, we're starting to see these young individuals hanging around outside the store, asking for money for drugs. And so I think, you know, people do this because it's in our culture. They're kind of like, oh, just give them $20 and maybe they won't break into your house. I think it is very grateful to be included as part of this conversation. It is very complicated, but you know, a lot of times simplest answer is the best answer. And I think right now, the way I look at it is we do have elements of our government, to include the federal government, that are trying their best to respond to meth and fentanyl. And I look at it as five fingers on the same hand, but I think if we're really going to wage war on drugs, then we have to be like this and work cohesively together to really get the kind of response that our people deserve. See those awesome.
Thank you to our panelists for your introductions and for sharing your backgrounds. We would also like to shout out Senator Sabina Perez. Thank you for joining us today. Your insights are invaluable as we address the challenges facing our community. As we begin today's discussion, it is essential to establish a foundation for the work we hope to accomplish together. Our mission today is clear: to foster an open and inclusive dialogue about the drug crisis on Guam, examining its far-reaching impacts on individuals, families, and our broader community. This forum provides a platform for collaboration where we can deepen our understanding of these challenges and identify solutions that will bring us closer to a healthier, safer, and more resilient island. We will focus on the full scope of the drug problem we face, including the specific threats posed by fentanyl, and explore effective pathways to address substance abuse. Once again, thank you for your participation in this critical dialogue.
We will now proceed to the question and answer portion of our discussion. To ensure a smooth and organized session, please keep in mind the following details. The individual at the front will assist in tracking time for each response. These indicators are designed to provide a courteous reminder to begin completing your response. In front of you, you'll find a notepad, a pen, a list of questions we will be discussing, and a microphone. Each response should be kept to a maximum of 2 minutes. You will have a 30-second grace period to complete your response. Session A will cover 5 questions. We will begin with Colonel Carlino and continue down the panel. Let us now begin with the first question, starting with Colonel Carlino. Question number 1. What are the impacts of drug use and drug-related crimes on our community?
Well, I think it's obvious that the crime rate is impacted. You have a rise of crimes when we talk about drugs because the people that are addicted to drugs or people that distribute drugs, they need the money, right? So in order to support the habit, they have to go out and commit crimes. And obviously, we've seen that rise throughout the years. It breaks up families, okay, because families that have people that are addicted to the drugs also impact their own families and their homes. And it also creates homelessness. If you don't see the rise of homelessness, people out there in the streets, then we're not living in the same island. So the other factor is health, right? If you really look at it, I'm not a doctor, but you know, if you ingest drugs and put it into your body, obviously it has an impact. And again, that also impacts your family and your home. So all these things are all correlated to drug addiction, and what we need to do is curb it, right? We're doing our part in the police department. We're trying our best with street interdiction, and we also have our special investigation sections that does the follow-up investigations to, respond and address all these follow-ups from the preliminary investigation reports that they receive from our street level patrol officers that deal with it. Thank you.
The impact of meth, if we're talking that drug specifically, is throughout our entire government, our entire political structure, our entire community. You cannot just say that meth is affecting us on a criminal level, where meth addicts are committing crimes. You have to understand that meth is destroying the very fabric of our community. It's family court. One of the things that we're having in family court right now is the parents are becoming addicted, which is breaking up the lives of the children, interrupting them. We're getting daily reports from CPS that the kids are not going to school, that are malnourished, and that's just the education level kids. The young babies and things, we've gone out with GPD to the boonies and found ranches where the kids are just basically left on their own. I've even heard of a firearm being given to a 5-year-old to shoot whoever goes on the ranch area. It truly is a behavioral issue. Once meth gets into people's lives, it's a synthetic substance that was specifically geared to create addiction. It's not like your normal opioids. It's specifically geared to change the brain so that you become addicted is one aspect, and then everything else in your life is geared towards becoming and getting more of that drug. The violent and nonviolent crimes have gone up. The medical requirements in order for our healthcare system to fund people that can't pay for the drugs, we're paying for it as taxpayers. Every level of our community is being affected. And as a chief law enforcement officer, that's the crimes that are being, possession of meth is a third-degree felony, period. There's no question about it. It is a crime. But what it does to the community is it destroys us and our future. Our children that can't go to school, our children that are being raised by foster parents, they will not have the skills as all of you here have, that you go to get your college education, you go get your education. And concluding here, the only thing that has really made an impact on meth is education. When you educate the population, they're less likely to become meth addicts. Thank you.
Dr. Jones, you mentioned in 1998 coming and seeing the big billboard saying the war on ice. And nothing has really changed except the people in the room who are trying to do something different. The Guam Uniform Controlled Substances Act was passed in 1998. So that was the very beginning of where we are today and the changes that have gone through society. The impact has not changed. The drug, maybe the drug of choice might have changed between the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Every decade has its drug of choice. We are still seeing methamphetamines as the current drug of choice, while fentanyl and other drugs are making their way, eking their way into the island community. Everyone talks about the socioeconomic impact of drugs on the community. It's not just the individual, it is the families, it is the businesses who lose employees, who lose profits. And so of course, all of that trickles down into everybody's life here, whether or not they can afford to pay a living wage. You think that that's connected to drugs? It absolutely is. Families that are impacted by it. Attorney General one refers to the family court, and yes, we do see the children and increase in our protective orders, in our family violence cases, and definitely an increase in our possession cases. So that is just in a nutshell the increases and the impact of drugs and drug use on the island, at least as far as the court's perspective comes from. And the things that we will talk about later on in the different questions will be, well, what are the solutions to these impacts? And so can't get to that part of it, but thank you.
So as I mentioned before, I mean, we've seen a increase in violent activity, possibly or potentially related to drug use, increased reporting of burglary. What I've seen is that the community's almost becoming numb to its usage, becoming indifferent to a person using ice or selling ice. And everybody here might or may know someone that is involved with a drug, but nobody wants to say anything. That's kind of where it begins, especially with law enforcement. We need that help. I could ask the question: Is methamphetamine use a law enforcement problem? Is a problem that only law enforcement can solve? And I would say that the answer is no. We need everybody's help. One of the other things that we're seeing on the national level is that, or on the island level, is that the use of methamphetamine is spreading into communities that traditionally were not known to use methamphetamine. And I'm talking about our island partners from our other island nations. Recently, I was in the epicenter to provide training to their law enforcement, and we didn't see a methamphetamine problem over there, but we're beginning to see that in the communities that have established in Guam and in Hawaii and other places. So, the widespread usage, the indifference towards its usage is something that we all have to acknowledge and, try to address together.
Yeah, and I kind of want to parrot a little bit of what he's saying. And what we're seeing is that there's our COFA brothers and sisters are unfortunately getting onto meth. And what happens as a result of that is it's a deportable offense. And so I've had clients, like I had one client who had like 9 children born on Guam, all US citizens, were left behind because the father completed drug court, but it was still the kind of case that got him deported. And so we ended up having to do a guardianship. The adult child is now caring for about half the children. The younger children went to back to trip with the parents. So we're trying to address that with our connections with Yellow and other Micronesian organizations to get the word out that, it's a community that hasn't really been using meth historically, but turning towards meth is very dangerous for themselves as well as their family. And so really obviously there's the punishment aspect, right? If you commit a crime, you are going to go to jail. But it's going to impact not just you, but your family, right? If you're a COFA resident, you'll get deported. Your children will either be left behind or they'll have to relocate with you. And I'm not sure if the those charges, right? They don't, I don't think they pay for the kids to go back, so it becomes a CPS, Child Protective Services issue, or other family members who get left behind. So the impact of meth really is criminal. I mean, we really only had like 180 criminal cases for drugs in FY 2024 possession, but it really covers every area of criminal law that we have, whether it's burglary, although we haven't really seen a corresponding increase in the number of burglaries charged or armed robberies, but there is, obviously there have been numerous homicides that are more drug related now than they've been in the past. So we're not sure what's causing that. I wish Regis was here. I don't know if it's bad math, but the drug road is for some reason becoming more violent. At least that's what we've been seeing the last couple of years. The pandemic, we have numbers for the pandemic, but those are all kind of skewed because everybody was on lockdown. There was actually a drop in both the number of reported burglaries and other property-related crimes. But that, was probably because everyone was staying home. We're not really seeing like we've seen let's say a 40% increase in drug charging, but we haven't really seen a corresponding increase in other crimes. What that tells me is this, that not every addict is necessarily going to commit a serious crime. And so, they have billboards that show these people about how meth kills, and they look like that's the 1%er of meth users. There are many functional meth users out there on island who are maintaining full-time jobs, who are not committing new crimes or crimes really to support their habit. These are the family members that we need to try to help before it gets to the point where they become involved with the criminal system. And so, we only really, it's really just the tip of the iceberg that the Attorney General's office and our office and the courts are dealing with, right? Because if we only have like 300 drug cases a year island-wide, we know that the problem is more widespread than that. And so we have to also address that side, the non-criminal side. And so thankfully, through the help of the Opioid Recovery Commission, a lot of funding's been provided to drug treatment providers like Toby Guam. They've been a game changer. And also, they're also going to set up, the Dignity Project that's going to provide homeless shelters for homeless and get them into treatment if that's the cause of their homelessness. But yeah, it's a big problem, but altogether, I think we can fix it.
Thank you. The question is, what are the impacts of drug use and drug-related crimes in our community? I think I need another 20 minutes to answer that. Yeah, it's widespread. I think a lot of the previous speakers have covered all of the areas that are impacted. I kind of want to start with schools. I talked to a lot of personnel at the schools, and what they're seeing is exactly what was said. They're seeing kids who aren't showing up to school. When they do, they haven't eaten. When they show up to school, they tell the school staff that their parents are missing in action, nowhere to be found. And a lot of times we have elementary kids watching the rest of the kids. So the impact there is that, one thing that Guam was known for and that we were very proud of was our tight-knit family structure. And so when we talk about this war being a tidal war on drugs, I'm not so sure that we're waging a war on drugs. It's more like drugs has waged a war on us, and that war has been won by the drugs. And so what I see us doing now is kind of going around after the explosion of meth and fentanyl and trying to pick up the pieces and put our island back together, because we have lost that. Some might say we're in danger of losing it. I say we've lost it. We have a record number of kids who are in child protective services. We have a record number of kids who are in the foster care system. And when I've had public health officials and foster care officials in front of us during legislative hearings, they say the number one cause of that is because parents would rather smoke meth than take care of their kids. And the reason why they're doing this is because we have never seen a demon like crystal methamphetamine ever. It's the most addictive substance, and I think what we're seeing now is from the advent of the war on ice, is we're seeing a lot of people who are using meth that's stronger. We're seeing people who have been using meth for 20, 30 years dropping dead. The medical examiner issued really one of the first reports that covered deaths related to drug overdoses just last year, and that report indicated that we had just in the area that was covered, and this was a year, we had about 40 overdoses on crystal methamphetamine. And I know the forum is on fentanyl. We also have seen about 7 fentanyl deaths, but you know, methamphetamine is the drug of choice on our island. I think that the legislature was really able to do things with Narcan, the availability of these opioid antagonists very early in the term. And so I think that's kind of helped stem the flow and the damage that fentanyl's going to do. And also, I mean, we talk to people with behavioral health, they have these vending machines where you can get Narcan for free, and they routinely have to refill that vending machine. So I don't think we've seen the true impact of the opioids and the fentanyl in Guam, because whereas they might have been dying from it last year, this year they got the Narcan. And so I think fentanyl is a very serious problem, but really for me, it's crystal methamphetamine. We're dealing, if you just Google meth psychosis, what we're seeing in long-term meth usage, and I've seen this with people in my family, is they're no longer the same person that we knew when we were growing up. It's completely changed into people that, I mean, I don't even know if the desire to get clean is even there anymore. You know, when I talk to my friends at rehab and treatment, it's a big struggle. We have rehab, we have treatment options, but sadly people have been addicted to meth for, you know, 10, 20, 30 years, and they have no interest in being clean. Mr. Torre talked about the one percenters, but I think if you go village to village, you are seeing these people who have been addicted to meth, who have just, their families have no more patience for it, and they're out on the street because they aren't being enabled by their families anymore. And instead, they're turning to a lot of people out on the street asking for money so that they can go get high. And I think compassion is an important part of this, but we also have to realize that we're dealing with crystal methamphetamine, which you're not going to be able to use the same treatment as you do with crack or as you do with cocaine, because this drug completely transforms people. And you know, the meth kingpins, sorry, how many minutes do I have? The meth kingpins, I mean, they have been successful in not just getting a lot of our COFA brothers and sisters to start using meth and ice, but also to start dealing it. And so we have really reached beyond the saturation point of crystal methamphetamine availability in Guam. And you know, I come out of the Guam Police Department, they get up every day and they arrest, you know, every single day we're seeing multiple people arrested for crystal methamphetamine related crimes. So they are definitely doing their part, and it's not just, you know, pounding the pavement and putting handcuffs on people. GPD does a lot of great work in the elementary schools. I'm proud to say that under my term, we reinstituted the DARE education, which is drug awareness, resistance, and education. I think that those efforts are to be commended, because we have Guam Police Department officers in the elementary schools talking to the kids about, you know, prevention, education, awareness of meth and fentanyl. And really, that's a very key part. I think when I was going to school, we had the Scare Straight, we had the DARE program, but there was a big gap where a lot of kids didn't get any of that type of information at the school level. So I'm very proud that the Guam Police Department is doing those efforts. I think it's something that we definitely need more of at every grade level. And you know, I think in a perfect world, if we're really declaring war on drugs, I mean, we need to have jingles. I think we need to do a lot of what the AG's doing, you know, Scared Straight. I don't know if it's a generational thing, but that should work for me. You know what I mean? When I saw, you know, what it was like talking to inmates, I was like, I've never gone to jail, and I haven't yet, knock on wood. So I think it is very complicated, but like I said in the beginning, the simplest answer is often what works. So this one, sorry about my over time.
For thoughtful responses. We would now like to move on to the second question for session A. We would like to start with Attorney General Douglas B. Moylan. And then this will be
So, the history of meth addiction, of drugs on Guam, one of the things that everybody's kind of talking about here is our perception has changed. This has percolated to one of the top debate issues for campaign seats in our society, and especially on Guam. I credit my having won a second term as the Attorney General on a shift in people's behaviors. I ran on the platform toughest AG on crime. My history has shown that. I was raised in an environment where bad acts equal bad consequences. My family educated me to the level where you guys are being educated, understanding the ramifications of your acts and not wanting to go there, not wanting to go to prison, not thinking prison is going to be a rehab facility. The one of the problems why it's so prevalent these days, economics. The supply and the demand curve is now in favor of the meth addicts and the dealers. There's too much supply out there, which I keep on saying, hit that Port Authority of Guam. They're not doing enough to bring that Port Authority of Guam and those dogs that we authorized on the Opioid Council. And I thank Public Defender Hattori. 18 dogs in February of 2023, last year. It took them over a year to bring it in, which I'm not pointing the finger at it, but we've only got 9 of the 18 that we authorized. The breeding programs coming in. We need to stop the supply coming into Guam. Once you stop the supply, price goes up. Why are the Micronesians being able to afford it now? And why are the police pulling them over? It's because they can afford it. 1 gram, according to Colonel, we're down at the price of 80 to $100. 10 years ago, I think it was like $300 a gram for meth. The problem is supply demand. The other side of the equation, demand. Drop the demand. Be smart, don't starve. Teach the kids, because as our whole system up here is putting these meth addicts behind bars, every weekend they're graduating another meth addict. The drugs are too cheap. You become a meth addict because it's geared towards the brain and it's overfilling the prisons. These are the things that we have to talk about and understand in this this meth area that we're in. It's history has not seen what we've seen today. It was in the 70s, it was heroin, we went through cocaine, and now we're into the synthetic drug of meth. There's a difference in the product that's out there. There's a difference in the way that they're distributing it, and we just have to reduce the supply and reduce the demand. Price goes up, there'll be less in the community. Thank you.
I think in terms of whether or not history has shaped the policies, the current policies and societal attitudes, I think it's more of a response that has changed, not necessarily the history of the Guam drug use. It's been acknowledged now that substance use is a disorder that's recognized in the DSM-5. So we acknowledge that it is, as Attorney General once said, a behavioral issue, a mental health issue. It is a crisis that as Senator Barnett said, it changes your physiology, how you think about things, how you act, your personality. So drug use changes these things. And so is it as simple as saying, oh, well, I don't know, why don't they just put it down? Why don't they just quit? Not everyone has the same support system. Talk about it here. Attorney General wanted to mention that, and also Senator Barnett, that we grew up in a certain household that said there are consequences to your action. And not everyone, unfortunately, grew up in that same type of household. So we're not just talking about generational trauma, we're talking about, each person as an individual. So I think what has changed really is not based on history, it's based upon evidence-based practices. And what will be an appropriate response to someone who is going through substance use. Now, I'm not talking about those who have been charged with possession with the intent to distribute or traffic. We're talking about possession for personal use. For whatever reason, an individual then became addicted to these drugs. And I've heard in testimony time and time again on a possession case, what is found in possession is usually residue, right, on a pipe, and a small amount, not enough for distribution. That's what we're seeing. And I think in 2023, GPD's own national crime report indicated that personal use arrests have gone up, skyrocketed, somewhere about 400 arrests in 2023. And what we're seeing is, Mr. Hattori indicated, 189 cases just in the Public Defender Services Corporation alone. There's not including the ultimate public defender. And these are the crimes that we see a huge increase in. Possession. The possession for personal use possession. not necessarily with the intent to issue. Thankfully, because of the idea that substance use is a treatable, although complicated, diagnosis, medical diagnosis, behavioral diagnosis, there have been changes in the way that the courts respond to these things. Now, don't get me wrong, there is attribution, right? There has to be a consequence to the action. If you do not participate in treatment, which was authorized under the Guam Uniform Substance Control Act, if you don't engage in treatment, you're not showing a true commitment to change and to this treatment to allow you to get that treatment while under the supervision of the courts, then of course you face 3 to 5 years just for personal use on that 30 felony. 3 to 5 years at the Department of Corrections. Yes, while in Department of Corrections, you can have the federal program of RSAC, Residential Substance Abuse. But as Attorney General Moreland pointed out, the jails, the institutions, those are not treatment facilities. So once these individuals go out, some of them are successful and some of them are not. The court's response to it has been an increase in our treatment courts. We talk about CPS getting involved in the families, and I apologize for blowing over time, but I'm stealing some of your the treatment courts, the adult drug court, veterans treatment court, all are based on evidence that these treatment programs work within a highly supervised court program. The Guam Family Recovery Program saved 115 children in the last year. 28 parents who had substance use disorders, who needed those treatments. So it's not just in terms of identifying the problem, but being part of the solution, right? And so I think it's not necessarily the history of the drug use, but the response to the drug use that has changed over time.
So kind of piggybacking on what Justice Zahn was talking about, with one of the cases of personal use, we've seen, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the kind of softening of drug laws has kind of led to the ease of access to use of methamphetamine. And so while our focus on the federal side is to look for those distributors, to look for those people that are supplying the methamphetamine, the fact that the demand is there keeps them in business. And it's a complex issue. Obviously, it requires a complex solution. And drug treatment, all those things are important. It's important to save those families. It's important to save those children where they can. But the laxing of drug laws, the changes that say, hey, this is okay, you can use this now. It kind of eases, in my opinion, eases the use of some of the more, I don't want to say harmful, I can't think of another word at this time, some of the more harmful drugs that previously would have been taboo to use. Drug prices are another issue. They're exactly right. Drug prices actually, 10 years ago were actually $600 per gram, and it's fallen to about 50 to 100 depending on where you're getting your methamphetamine. Again, I know we're trying to focus on fentanyl, but methamphetamine is still, for our agency at least, the primary issue we're seeing with drug issues on the law.
And I know you guys are all too young to remember the heroin days of the 70s and the early 80s. I was actually looking at that just where attorneys at our morning meeting were curious. They're like 103 unsolved homicides, right? And in the 70s and 80s, there were like, I think, like 50 of them. Were just from that period of time. Most of them were probably related to heroin. I mean, we're getting to that point now with meth, and so we really need to figure out how to stem the violence that's out there. And so, hopefully we'll come up with some solutions. I think one thing that the judge mentioned really is that's really working are the drug treatment courts, and it's really there's alcohol courts, there's the ADC 1, 2 courts, but there's also the Guam Family Recovery Court. And what we're doing is we're trying to restore people's dignity, right? And make them participate in the society by letting them know, as long as they're engaged, we'll engage with them and help them recover, right? And there's some that don't want to participate, and they get revoked. I mean, in the last 2 years, I've seen more people on probation revoked than I have my prior 24 years. And so what happens when someone's revoked is they get the full sentence, usually that's 3 years for a type. So if you're caught with a residue uh, amount of meth in your type, and you refuse to go to treatment, you don't check in, these technical violations add up. At some point, the Attorney General's office will ask you to revoke your probation. And then you'll get 3 years in jail. And it doesn't really take 3 years of jail really to get you the treatment you need. And so, but it's an outdate, it's a law that was passed when meth first hit the island, right? I mean, right now, the minimum fine is $5,000, right? I mean, none of our clients can afford an attorney, let alone a $5,000 fine, right? So there are a lot of things that hold back people from succeeding to almost like set up for failure from the beginning. And so we're slowly addressing those issues. The court's been very willing to let people convert it to community service. They rewarded people for their participation with credits, like community service credits. I know recently one of the other issues, right, is the SNAP laws were changed to allow people with prior convictions to, if they successfully completed probation, to allow them to qualify for SNAP and TANF, and hopefully we can also get them eligible for housing with Section 8 and Borough. I know it's not a matter of being compassionate, but if someone pled guilty and really 95% of our clients accept responsibility and plead guilty. And once they're done paying their punishment, we should not keep our foot on their throat. And we should try to help them re-engage with society and, make them eligible for these federal benefits like SNAP as well as Section 8 and to me, it's really not a matter of pampering them as much as, anyone here who's a parent, or when you punish your kid, once they're done with the punishment, you don't shun them, you don't keep them aside, you bring them back into the fold, and hopefully their behavior changes, right? And so, while we're talking about the history, we can learn from our history and not make the same mistakes that we did in the past by overreacting and basically condemning people for the rest of their lives with laws that affect not just the addict, but the addict's children and family. And so I'm hoping that as we go forward, we learn from our history. We don't try to impose excessive fines that realistically no one really pays anyways. All it does is make some new community service that ends up getting supervised by a probation officer, which means probation officers cannot be out supervising people who need to be on probation because they're too busy following up with all these other conditions that we're imposing. And other restrictions that let's make the punishment really fit the crime. If they need treatment, make the sentence long enough to get treatment, and leave it at that, and hopefully let them out and get back and support the family.
Thank you for the question. I think since the war on ice way back in the Kamakang days, we've seen our societal attitudes change so much. At the onset, I remember it was shock and surprise that this, in Hawaii, they call it shabu shabu, that thing that was going on in Hawaii had reached the Guam shores, and that there were, drug kingpins who were manufacturing this. And then I think it went from shock and surprise to outrage and anger, and now we've unfortunately moved, I think, in a lot of ways to our community just accepting what has happened. And I think that that's because we haven't seen kind of I mean, we're all on the same page here, but I just don't know if we're working in tandem or cohesively enough to see the kind of impact that maybe we saw before. The prominence of War on Ice wasn't the first one that we did. We actually had numerous campaigns. There was Ice Will Shatter Your Life. There was also the Mandania Drug Task Force, which I think was the last effort that we had that really brought a lot of relevant partners to seat at the same table. And granted, there are federal task force that are comprised of local law enforcement personnel, but I think, it goes a long way to reassure our society that, we're trying to punish these bad actors who, really are poisoning our people just for a profit. And so these societal attitudes, I think, reach outrage as well when we have, prominent members of our government who condone behavior like drug dealing. We've had instances where we have busted law enforcement, corrupt law enforcement officers involved with the sale and, conspiracy to promote methamphetamine. And then we've seen, our government bend over backwards to accommodate individuals who are politically connected. So I think societal attitudes are moving to acceptance because maybe they kind of think that this politics just gets in the way of this. But, fortunately, I was able to capitalize on the sentiment that we do need to punish these people and get stricter penalties, which really align with the national standard. We're not, the law that got passed doesn't, we're not throwing anybody in the hole for 100 years. These are penalties that were already on the books throughout a large majority of the states. And, we talk about the simple possession cases, and Guam, even before my law was passed, did have some of the strictest penalties relative to possession of crystal methamphetamine. And this is just simple possession, but the judges had the discretion to use what's called the Justice Safety Drawback. So a lot of times, if you were pulled over and you had, residue in the pipe and the penalty is 3 to 5 years, a lot of times the judges will divert from that prison sentence to put you into treatment. And just, anecdotally, I've heard a number of cases where people go into treatment, then they relapse, and then they go commit a crime. And so now it becomes, you have someone who started a simple possession who was out there who is now charged with robbery, and then who, for whatever reason, is further released and then commits another crime. So I think all of this really led the legislature to a place where we said, hey, enough is enough. People are just tired of the crime. I think that we have to send a strong message, not to the addicts. I mean, my stance has always been, let's treat the addicts and let's punish the dealers as much as we can. I think that that's what really led for the impetus of the support for my bill. I wish I could say it passed unanimously, but Senator Tom Fisher actually voted against it, and I'm pretty sure that's because of the defense lawyer. But for the most part, I was able to get the support of the legislature, and even the governor, who has very liberal ideas about drug enforcement policy, signed that bill into law. So I think we're back at the point where a lot of us are accepting what's going on, but there are even more people who really want to see a concerted effort from the government, whether it's, the AG saying meth is death, or, GPD telling fifth graders about the dangers of meth, which I think is entirely needed because as the chair of education, I've heard from elementary schools that they're finding meth pipes in kids' backpacks. So this, I think the societal attitude that we're seeing now is very encouraging, especially with the students who are holding this forum. And we just got to get back to that point where we can rally the community and all of the relevant people doing the work to really focus and be on the same page. Those was.
So historically, meth has been around since the early 1990s. And before that, you have heroin and cocaine. But again, meth is the choice of drug right now. And as everyone in the panel has mentioned, people have gotten bolder, okay? The attitudes that we have to deal with out in the streets, that our officers encounter, they're much more bolder, okay? They don't respect even the uniform. That's how meth affects individuals that are high on this drug, okay? So policies, we have to adjust our policies accordingly, right? The type of people that we deal with, they're high, they don't care. Being arrested, going to jail doesn't faze them any longer. That's the type of people that we have to deal with out there, okay? So we have to adjust our policies accordingly, right? The actual policy on dealing with drugs is the same. It just has to be adjusted as time goes on, okay, through different decades. It's been said that SOP doesn't stand for standard operating procedure. It stands for standing operating procedure. That's as it stands currently or prior to the adjustments being made. So we do adjust our policies according to the type of investigations that we conduct out there. But the price of meth, like the Attorney General mentioned earlier, it's dropped. That means the demand is high, right? So if the demand is high, that means we have a lot more work cut out for us. The arrests are pretty much the same for the last 3 years. We average around 600 arrests. So we're doing our part of the Guam Police Department. The whole criminal justice system, I can't answer for. Okay, we arrest them, we do our part. How it ends up, that's beyond us. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. We will now move on to the third question. We will start with Judge Senzon. Judge Senzon, here's the third question. Which drugs are primarily affecting Guam today, and how has the situation evolved over the past few years?
I think everyone is in agreement that the drug of choice is still methamphetamine. That's still what's needed in our community. Fentanyl is making its way in. She's here, right? So there's no denying that. And in terms of the cost of it, I mean, I don't know what a gram is because that's the metric system, but I do know that it costs more to buy packed cigarettes than it does to buy methamphetamine. So, and that's to put that in perspective. I think Senator Barnett in his opening introduction indicated, Senator or Mr. Tory, that it's in your marijuana. It could be. And so that's how folks get addicted. I think I've been referring to marijuana as something that was, now legalized in terms of our public laws, and it's getting into these substances. You don't know what is in the substances until you know what's in the substance, and you won't know what's in the substance until maybe an autopsy is performed, right? So that's the problem. That is a very real situation that we're experiencing right now. The overdoses, the effect on your physiology. I've lost some drug court participants because even though they're in recovery, their heart is so trashed by the drugs over constant use that they stroke out. They have heart attacks. They die while they're in recovery. And so that's a very real scenario that is painted here. And so that's kind of like maybe the 50% of those who are in who are methamphetamine drug users. You turn left and turn right, and we say this in our law school, what if you won't be here next year? And that's probably true, because there are triggers that these folks face every day. And it's a matter of, putting these, it's not being soft on the crime, because it is not just compassion, it's also finding a solution, which is why the treatment courts have been created. And we're not inventing the wheel for them long. These have been courts that have been enforced over 20 years in other jurisdictions in the continental US that have very real successes. So I know the question is limited to what drugs are we seeing. We are seeing an influx of many different synthetic drugs as well. Point being is that even with the influx of these drugs, ICE is still problematic, and it is the biggest thing that we need to be able to combat. Senator Barnett said, we lost the war. We are triaging right now. That's the situation. We are in triage. We are still in battle, and we're trying to, prevent the hemorrhaging is what we're basically trying to do. 400 personal use possession arrests that we had just last year. Whatever amount of those things that come through the courts, those are the ones that we can help. We can still, there's a last chance for these folks to be assisted through treatment, through court supervised treatment. And so ICE still being the major drug of choice on Guam, I think that we can get a handle on that if we, again, it's education, it's treatment, and then it is also making sure that there is a consequence to those folks who don't comply with the treatment program.
So I'm just going to piggyback on everybody and say, yes, I believe that methamphetamine is still a drug of choice on island. We can see that in the price and the supply. I think we all know that the demand has not gone down. So when we're seeing a lower price program for methamphetamine, you're generally seeing a higher level of supply. That's the issue that we're trying to address, again, in triage, right? We're trying to address that because that seems to be the biggest issue. Nationally, fentanyl is an issue. It's throughout the news. Nationally, fentanyl is a very dangerous drug. It only takes a little dosage to overdose. It could be incorporated into any other drug that's being produced. You know, we have seen overdoses here in Guam. And so, you know, one of the things that we did at HSI was when fentanyl became an issue, or when it became nationally prominent, was to try and get with our law enforcement partners to supply Narcan, which is the antidote basically to opioid overdoses. At the time, you know, we were the only agency providing training on how to use Narcan and actually to distribute it. We actually went to the legislature to ask their assistance in kind of reforming the law because it was antiquated to allow Narcan to be distributed to our law enforcement partners. So that's one of the things we did on the fentanyl side. But again, you know, the drug of choice on island, I think we know this, it seems to be methamphetamine. And so through our partnerships with our local partners, our task force officers, I work with a lot of guys here with the Guam Police Department, with Guam Customs. We're trying to approach that. We're trying to attack the distribution side of the methamphetamine issue. And it can be difficult. It is difficult, but that's been our focus for our agency and other partner federal agencies.
I mean, I'm not gonna parrot what everyone said. I know that part of the question involved how has the situation evolved over the past few years, and you know, I think the rise in violence really is we should really be concerned about. I mean, there was a period of time where, and then also the increase in the number of mental health cases that are being caused by the use of methamphetamine. It triggers people getting schizophrenia and other mental illnesses. And so the last few years, it seems that there's been an uptick in violence, especially you know, among drug users towards other drug users. And I know that I've talked with many of my clients about, you know, the possibility of doing a gun buyback program. Like, let's just try to get as many guns off the street as we can. And, you know, my clients tell me that they, you know, everyone has an unregistered firearm from a deceased relative or however you obtain it, right? And if, you know, these programs have worked in the mainland just to get guns off the streets, I think if we could figure out a funding source and maybe have, I mean, the U.S. Attorney's Office or maybe the AG's office or GPD institute of gun buyback program, at least we would be getting guns off the street. I know one of the homicides earlier in the year was to pay off a drug debt or something, or a gambling debt. If they were able to sell their gun, maybe that could have been avoided. You know, we have to look at other ways of reducing the amount of violence because it, you know, I'm just concerned it's just going to get worse over time.
Thank you for that question. Which drugs are primarily affecting Guam today, and how has the situation evolved over the past few years? The answer is meth, and it's gotten way worse. Thank you. I was kidding. So, yeah, it's gotten way worse. So, like I told you guys earlier, the former medical examiner, Dr. Jeffrey Nine, for the first time in many years, at least, I've been in the media for a long time. I don't remember any other report coming out that really detailed the impact of drugs and deaths caused by drugs. And so, as I shared with you guys, he had reported something like 34 methamphetamine overdoses. And so what happens is, as we see people who've been we've been fighting meth for 30 years, right? And what happens when you use meth for an extended period of time is, every time you use meth, your heartbeat accelerates. And the more you use meth over long term, the muscle in your heart gets thinner and thinner from beating so fast until one day it pops just like a balloon and then multi. So they see this a lot at the Guam Memorial Hospital emergency room. You go talk to the ER nurses, they get a lot of patients who come in who are suffering from cardiac arrest caused by methamphetamine. And so, again, in support of the AG's efforts, he's got this billboard, right, that has pictures of methamphetamine addicts from the states. And I would just offer the suggestion for the next billboard, put the silhouette of 34 bodies and then put a number 35 and say it could be you. And I think this is the type of thing that we really need to impress upon our young people is that meth doesn't just lead you to a life of decades of, crime and addiction and, losing your family and neglecting your kids. I mean, you very well could die from it. And so I think that's one of the things that's definitely changed. I mean, for all we know, we could have been seeing this number of methamphetamine deaths ever since 1998, but there was just no one who did a study on it and reported it. And so the medical examiner, Dr. Nine, in his report, not only found that meth was involved in a large number of homicides, but suicides as well. A lot of people who committed suicide had meth in their system, which to me, I interpret that as, obviously feeling like they could never escape that prison of addiction. And so I think that's definitely one of the things that's changed is for 20 years, we were kind of grasping at air, trying to figure out how meth was impacting us other than in the obvious ways. And now that we have actual data and stats, I think that it should fuel a lot of our efforts moving forward, because now we can definitively say that, hey, we've lost 40 of our brothers and sisters to this scourge of methamphetamine. So yeah, fentanyl obviously is an issue. We have seen some overdose deaths, but I think that HSI was to be commended. They approached the legislature and said, hey, we need a bill that will enable the Guam Police Department to have Narcan. So in the event they come across somebody who's overdosing of fentanyl, we're able to administer a life-saving dosage of that. And I think really, for me, that's why we haven't seen some of the more shocking numbers that we're seeing in the States, is I think, knocking on wood here, and this is not a victory in that, but I think we're able to mitigate early on some of the potential damage from fentanyl. See those ones.
So it is methamphetamine that's the most prevalent and the drug of choice. And it's been that way for the past decade or so. And coming in second is cocaine. And then you also now have fentanyl. So to prove that, I have some data from our CID working collaboratively with the federal investigations partners that we have. So crystal meth, we've seized over 31,000 gross grams, which is a street value of about 3 million. Cocaine, 620 gross grams, a street value of 186,000. And then fentanyl, we have about 228 pills, those blue M30 pills, street value of about 20 to 30 pills, $20 to $30 a pill. So do the math, it's about how much it's going to total out to. Yes, fentanyl is becoming a problem next to meth. And of course, the potency, right? Usually these pills are used for, they're prescribed similar to what morphine does, painkillers. But fentanyl is like, 100 times more potent than meth. So, and you lace fentanyl with meth and marijuana, and you mix those things together, it becomes really heavy. And that's why our officers, we talk about policies, and the question before this, we've of course changed policies or adapted to, putting policies out there to protect our police officers when we deal with fentanyl. EPEs, Narcans, right? Those are all made available now to our police officers. And we even tell them not to even touch it or test it. We don't even use, we're recommending that they don't even field test these suspected fentanyl and just package them and send them straight to the lab for confirmation. But that's what's going on in the streets. Thank you.
So which drugs and how has it evolved? People don't realize that human nature, and I guess the arts and humanities will reemphasize this, human nature is prone for addiction. Whether it's girlfriend, boyfriend, drugs, just human nature in general is prone for addiction as we go through our lives. Another fact that people might not realize, and my dad actually told me this, he's a pharmacist. Meth is not a new drug. World War II, the Nazis, the Germans used what they call pervitin. It's a meth-based substance in order to get their soldiers into that state of mind that they could be a better soldier. When you take that human nature is prone to addiction, when you take that idea that when we go through our lives, we go through ups and downs, whether you're a teenager, whether you're an adult, whether it's depression, whatever. When you take meth and you combine it with human nature, you're going to get an addiction, but you're going to get an addiction, I think like Judge Senzon mentioned, it's triage because meth does not let you go. And that's why I'm very critical of the adult drug court, and I've been publicly outspoken on it. It's not the drug that makes you the meth addict, it's your human nature that makes you prone to take a substance that today you're cured, tomorrow you get into a divorce, you get into a bad relationship, you're looking for alcohol, which is a drug. But it's easier to buy meth these days than it is to get a 6-pack of beer. 6 tokes, I think. You can get 6 tokes of meth, and it's cheaper than a 6-pack of beer. People that would do that, once you're into that drug, it won't let you go. That's what we're seeing, that's what I'm seeing, that's what the statistics are showing. This is complicated when we talk about the evolution of it. When your families are breaking down, and with the next generation of kids coming out there that don't have good parents because their parents were in rehab during all their teenage years, those formative years that we talk about, and that the feeling of abandonment attacks the kids. They feel that they have deficiencies of not being well adjusted and probably more prone to early pregnancies and meth addiction and any type of addiction. Those are the things that are in the background of everything that we're talking about today. It has a snowballing effect. Our society is breaking down at the fundamental level that we need to find ways to reverse, all different ways to reverse. That opioid council effort that I champion, along with Mr. Hattori and our opioid council, the Dignity Project is just a triage type of effect. Give people the dignity of having an evening, a place to get showered, their clothes clean, so they're not homeless because nobody wants them. That's what the homeless, when we went in with the mayors and the lieutenant governor and people last year, that's what we were finding in the homeless encampments, was people that were meth addicted. And they were Chamorros. They were our own people. Availability and price, another evolution. We talk about it's gone down in price. You're going to get more people being subject to being addicted. Alcohol does not have the same effect that meth does. Alcohol, you're an alcoholic, you get off the wagon, you get back on the wagon for your entire life. It's not going to normally kill you. It has all the same side effects, but meth has much worse side effects. So for this question, it's a lifelong process. We have to realize, does the meth create the destruction of people's lives, or do a series of bad choices in your life create you're being more prone to take a substance such as meth and not understanding the substance that you're taking? So our job as law enforcement, drive the price up, get it out of the community so it's less likely to create the meth addict. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. We would now like to move on to the fourth question for session 8. We would like to start with HSI Supervisor Special Agent Robert Ramirez. Agent Robert Ramirez, here is the fourth question. What challenge does Guam face in combating drug trafficking and related crimes?
Sorry, that's a pretty good question there. So I think it's very well known. Resources, we need more manpower, we need more equipment, more technology. The police department, law customs will all tell you they need more people. Recently, and I think it was based on the opioid settlement, they required 9 more K9 dogs, which is helpful in borders. That will help interdiction operations. Our agency, we have what's called a Border Enforcement Security Task Force that incorporates folks from law customs, folks from the police department, Coast Guard, NOAA. We invite all players, and the goal of that is to address border issues, specifically interdiction of narcotics. You know, really to address the border issue, because we don't see Guam as a production site for methamphetamine. We know that almost all of it is imported or brought onto the island from different locations. Traditionally, the source of supply was Asia. That has since transitioned. We believe the source of supply is now the West Coast or other states nearby. The quality of the methamphetamine is very high. What we see when we interdict it is 98 to 100% purity. So when it's selling that cheap, we know the supply is really high and that it's readily available. And it really does take a group effort because my office is small. We can't address the whole border on our own. We work in partnership with Guam Police Department, with Guam Customs to address that. But with all the methamphetamine coming in, I think new tools are needed, new ways to address that. K9 is a great avenue. I know that there are some inspection facilities that are being developed at the port, which should help. Again, if the methamphetamine is coming in and there's that much supply coming in, we have to figure out where that is. U.S. Postal Service has a great program. They've stopped a lot of methamphetamine. But they can't do it on their own, and not all the methamphetamine is coming through the Postal Service. So, I mean, if you go on and on and on, each agency can tell you what they need, but it's those three things. You need more manpower. You need, in my opinion, technology, and the resources and tools for those folks to do what they need to do.
I'm only really gonna just add one thing. So, I mean, we know that the price of meth is low. So that has done is it's really expanded the consumer base, right? I mean, we have clients that are homeless that are smoking meth now. And so as we move forward and cut off the supply of meth, the cost of meth will go up, and then people are not going to be able to afford to support that addiction. It's going to result in I believe, an increase in property crimes and other crimes to support it. And so, I mean, that might be why we really don't have as many burglaries as we anticipate, because people are somehow affording the lower price of meth. But once we reduce the supply, obviously the price can go up, and with this expanding consumer base, so we need to really start addressing how are we going to treat our addicts now, right? Before they become just as well.
Thank you for the question. I agree with Mr. Ramirez that it's simple. When we talk to Pareto, the head of customs, and he says that they have, for example, 180 customs officers, and I ask him, well, what number of officers do you need just day to day to make a dent? And they say, oh, over 300. So customs, as you guys know, is responsible for enforcing a lot of our border. And when you talk to the people who are in law enforcement, I think it's, against rocket surgery. It's not coming in on the plane. It's coming in the post office, and we see record seizures at the post office, but we haven't seen the impact of those seizures. And we're talking they're getting a lot of meth at the post office. We haven't seen the impact of that out on the street. So for me, it's very simple. Even Director Borrego said, this comes through the port. I mean, obviously, there are thousands of containers that come through the port, and if you just take a little bit of context to what Mr. Rivers had said, he said that we are now trying to stand up technology to inspect these containers. And so again, 30 years after now starting to do a lot of things that, should have been put into place a long time ago. I mean, I'm not gonna complain or finally doing something, but I think if you look around the world, especially the US, everybody's kind of in the same situation with meth. I don't think you can point to a jurisdiction that has, quote unquote, beaten meth. So that's also a challenge, is that we don't have a real successful way to treat meth addiction because it's so addicting. And I think another challenge that they face is that, Guam's a small community. We all know who the kingpins are, but many times law enforcement can't make any progress because people don't want to give information. And people are compromised or they're scared to say something. And that for me is one of the biggest impediments to law enforcement successfully prosecuting a lot of the big kingpin cases is that there are threats that are made that people just don't want to get involved with it. And so that I think is another challenge as well. In a lot of ways, there's a culture of secrecy. Going back to the crimes with the church, a lot of people knew what was happening. We just didn't want to say anything. Same thing with the meth addiction. Our island for 20 years, just give Trigger $20 and they'll be okay. And it's not going to bother us. And now it's come to the point where, Patsutu meth is just everywhere. It's saturated. Mr. Tori's right. We got a homeless guy that hangs around the legislature. And one morning he asked me for $10. And I said, what are you going to do with $10? He goes, oh, I can go check so-and-so and then I can get a hit off their ice pipe for $10. And so when we talk about the price of meth, I've heard 50 to 100, but I just saw a news article in a magistrate where someone was getting a gram of meth for $20. And so then those are the challenges. It's absolutely everywhere. The Guam Police Department can do their part and go out and arrest people. But if all of the elements of our criminal justice system and treatment are not, like I said, working like this, then we're going to see what we're seeing now. See those ones.
Okay, again, I'm Major Fred Charter, the Investigations Bureau Chief. And so one of the challenges that Guam faces and hate crimes. So for our department, and I think it's been echoed throughout the panelists here, is that number one, it's our personnel. We're having issues, retaining and also recruiting. We're working on those. We got some incentives to have them come on, as well as stay on the department. Another thing that we're having challenges also is technology, like the other panelists have mentioned. And when you're talking about those, it limits our ability to do the enforcement aspect. But one of the things that we've done in the past few years is, and I like to use this phrase, it's a three-pronged approach, right, or a pyramid type. It's the education aspect, there's the law enforcement aspect, and then there's the treatment. For us, we focus on both the education and the law enforcement. Although we're a law enforcement agency, it's my belief as well, I come from the school of prevention. So we hit the schools and like Senator Barnett was mentioning, we're re-implementing the DARE program. We currently have a program called Project B. We're working with the schools on those where we're doing presentations, and then we're also having at-risk kids, so that these are kids that are probably having challenges at home, and we'll get them involved in activities so that it takes them away from hopefully becoming a future addict. Although it's a challenge, like I said, with the technology and our personnel, we still use other techniques and other methods to combat the drug epidemic. And like I said, it's education is an aspect that we've started to focus on. I just got recently overassigned to Investigations Bureau, and I told the staff that staff that we need to really hit hard on the education, because it's my belief that if we hit the kids at a young age from elementary all the way up to high school, and it's the hope and the intent that it'll eventually then prevent them from getting into drugs. Thank you.
So your question is, how effective have the laws been, and what is the success on it? I've been in office 2 years. The downward trend in the price started at least in 2020 and started to go down. That was a big topic when the AG's race was going on. Our approach in the AG's office is to mix it up. We need to find every which way in order to address the drug problem on Guam. Whether, like I said before, the supply to demand curve, the idea that we're also hiring in the AG's office, you guys, the college-educated students, in order to bring the new perspective on what exactly in the past 5 to 10 years the kids are seeing in this, in terms of how do they perceive drugs, why are they taking it, who's approaching them. When you look at it from the laws, I was a legislative counsel for 6 years in the executive branch, the judges in the judicial branch. These laws are on the books, but a law on the book means nothing unless you have the officers in the executive branch bringing them in, making them face the judges and you, the jury, and then suffering the consequences. We don't bring enough appreciation to what suffering does in people's lives. Suffering is the catalyst for change. When you're in a bad situation, most normal people try to change behaviors in order to get into a better situation. Hence, you're getting educated so you can get a better life for you and your family and your kids in the future. Everybody at this table chose that pathway. How do we educate drugs out of people's lives? And I get it, you know, you've got the different classes in our society, people that are less privileged, but that should not be an excuse. And in the AG's office, and you can ask my staff on that, I don't like excuses. I'm 58 years old. I've heard excuses all my life. I've seen consequences of people that just make excuses. We need to find solutions. That's what we're doing. As more people are being put in jail, we need to build bigger prisons. We cannot be letting meth addicts out on the street because it's going to end up in 2 words, crime victim. The AG's office is supposed to be protecting the crime victims. We're not here to protect the defendants. We're doing our role that you guys elected me and my team into that office. I cannot be a therapist like I opened this up in, because if I become a therapist, who's going to enforce the laws? Who's going to show you that a bad act ends in a bad consequence? Drive the price up for the drugs, reduce the demand. Meth kills. That is the bottom line slogan of what's going out there. The judge mentioned it. I talked to Dr. Nine, who's part of our law enforcement community. We've now moved with Dr. Sue. The CME, everything that he does for that 1-year report that he put out in 2023, and I was with Senator Barnett, Chairman Barnett, in that legislative conference room when they did the public hearing, and Senator Perez. 1 in 17 autopsies on Guam in 2023 had meth in their system. Young people that should not have died. As Dean Jones said, they did not intend to die. The most prevalent cause of the death, heart failure. Heart failure because the drug destroys that heart. And if you find Jesus at 30 or 40 years old and you've been a meth addict for the last 20 years, good luck, because according to the mortician, you have just cut your lifespan down to maybe 50, 60 years for all the damage you've done to yourself. This is the part where it educates us as a community. Don't do it because you're going to end up dead. Don't not do it because the Attorney General or Judge Senzon or GPD is going to arrest you. You're going to shame your family. Do it because you want to live. And for the women out there, do it because you want to keep your teeth and be attractive. Because one of the first things that Dr. Sewell, a former client of mine, said, how we can tell his patients that come into his room, when their teeth start falling out and they look at the form, I've taken cocaine, I've taken meth. That's why your teeth are falling out, because that's the first indication that you're going to be in the ground and in some slab. Is your teeth start falling out, your lifestyle has to change. And the bottom line is, meth is poison. This is how we appeal to the next generation of kids out there. This is why we know that the meth dealers out there are losing their customers, because GPD, Judge Senzon, and the whole team of people fighting meth are putting them in jail. So where are the drug dealers going to get their next customers? It's your kids. That's why in the AG's office, we're hitting the schools now for the next 9 months. We're lining them up and trying to do what Nancy Reagan, just say no. Remember that? For those of you that are old enough for that. That was the President Reagan's administration on how to attack the drug problem back then. So this is what we've got to do as a community. We've got to rethink the wheel. We've got to attack it from different perspectives. You use the old school, and then you use the younger people out there, and you get the ideas from them. And that's where we come up, be smart, don't starve. Thank you.
Just to clarify my question, please. What challenges Guam faces in combating drug trafficking? I think the other slogan too, Attorney General Moreland would say no to dope and no to drugs, right? Again, we're all dating ourselves up here in this panel. I think in terms of the challenges, it really starts with education. You said it, it's reaching out to children, because in terms of drug trafficking, that's the source, right? So we want to try to cut everything off at the source. But the Guam State epidemiological profile for 2021 indicated that 36% of school-age children had been either offered, sold, or provided illicit drugs. And that's a huge percentage of the school-age children. I mean, that's where it's starting. But education doesn't just start and end in the elementary schools, the high schools, or even in the colleges. The education continues on. For panelists such as all of us, I continue to go to training every year to see, well, what is the best practice for folks who are in in the courts, who suffer from drug addiction, but who also there has to be accountability for the possessions and definitely for the drug trafficking. But education also extends to everyone of the folks here in the panel, from executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch, to work together to see, okay, so we know there is a war that has been waged on us rather than us waging the war on drugs. And that obviously didn't work. We thought that we were waging the war, but the war was drugs coming to us. And so it's about collaboration and seeing, yes, there has to be accountability. But when there is an opportunity to make the change in an individual, that then is a ripple effect on their family, on their community, and then on the island in general, then why wouldn't we take that opportunity? We graduated about 500 folks since the inception of the adult drug courts. There is a polarizing opinion whether or not drug courts work for some people, and for the individual that did take a benefit and whose whole lives have changed since graduating from that court, it made a difference to them, right? There's that whole story about, a kid who's throwing hundreds of starfish on the ocean. So it's going to take you forever to throw these starfish back into the water. Why are you even doing it? And he goes, well, it made a difference to that one, right? And so that's kind of the perspective also that we're taking. Yes, of course, there has to be accountability for those who do not participate in a legislatively sanctioned, based upon the Drug Court Act, treatment program. And if they don't do that, then, they face imprisonment, 3 years, and, for the resident. So the challenge really is the continuing education, not just at the education at the grade school level, but throughout, including where do we here sit at a table, not just on a panel, and actually effectuate the findings that are in a report. Where does it go from 70 to 100-page report to actual seeing these changes implemented and these programs actually implemented and the changes happening, so that our law enforcement can focus on, the daily activities instead of focusing on the biggest problems, which are trying to engage with the port authority and with customs and with liberty and drug trafficking. It's at every single level, and I think that that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you, panelists, for your thoughtful responses. Can we please get a round of applause for our panelists? Each and every one of you has shared, contributing valuable insights to our discussion. At this time, we would like to take a 5-minute break. Please help yourselves to some refreshments. And please visit the Attorney General's campaign details in the back. We will convene in 5 minutes. For those of you who are in the session,